Look at her, 17 years old, blonde hair, a smile that made people feel like she already knew them. Her name is Britney Drexel, and she is stepping out of her hotel into the thick, warm air of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on the night of April the 25th, 2009. She has no idea what is about to happen, but someone else does. He is already there, already watching, positioned in the darkness behind her, watching the way she moves, watching the direction she's heading, are tracking her the way a predator tracks something it has already decided to take. He has done this before. He has stood in shadows like these before. And the system that was supposed to keep him locked away, the system that sentenced him to 42 years behind bars, handed him back to the streets after just 21 of them. He has been free for 5 years by the time Britney steps out of that hotel. 5 years of walking through neighborhoods like this one. 5 years of being out here. And Britney does not know his name. She has never seen his face. All she knows tonight is that she needs to walk back to her hotel to return a pair of borrowed shorts. That is the entire reason she's outside. That is the full extent of her plan for the next 10 minutes. She's texting her boyfriend as she walks. The conversation is light, easy, the kind of back and forth two people share when they're simply keeping each other company across distance. She is 17 years old and she's walking down South Ocean Road and she's going to return a pair of shorts. And this man, this registered offender who should still be sitting in a prison cell, has already made his decision. What is about to happen to Britney Drexel will not be solved for 13 years. 13 years of a mother who refused to stop searching. 13 years of dead ends and false leads and a case that went cold so many times. The investigators themselves wondered if the truth would ever come out. 13 years of a family that kept a telephone hotline active, kept billboards posted on the roads their daughter last traveled, kept showing up in Myrtle Beach with a photograph and a stack of flyers, and a grief that never once loosened its grip. And when the truth finally came, it confirmed the darkest possible version of what everyone had feared. This is the case of Britney Drexel. This is Motives and Methods, and this story demands to be told. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel exists because cases like this one deserve more than a few minutes of airtime. They deserve the full story. They deserve for someone to sit with every detail and refuse to look away. Take a second right now to hit the like button, leave a comment with the next case you want covered, and subscribe so you never miss another one. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Rochester, New York. If you have never been, picture a mid-sized American city sitting on the southern edge of Lake Ontario. The kind of place that built itself on industry and quietly became something more layered than that over the decades. More than 1 million people call the greater Rochester area home. Kodak put this city on the map. 2 internationally recognized universities put it on another kind of map entirely. And in the township of Chile, in a neighborhood just outside the city center, a family named Drexel was raising a daughter. Britney Drexel arrived in this world on October the 7th, 1991. Her mother was a woman named Dawn. Her biological father was a young man named John. They were teenagers themselves when Britney came. Barely past childhood and suddenly responsible for a life that depended entirely on them. They gave everything they had, but young parenthood carries a weight that quietly reshapes the people underneath it. And by the time Brittany was still very small, the relationship between Dawn and John had come apart. Her father drifted out of the picture. But here is what you need to understand about Britney Drexel. She was not defined by the things that had been taken from her. As a young child, she lost the sight in one eye, something that would break the confidence of a lot of people, especially a young girl growing up in a world that judges appearance with a particular sharpness. But Britney did not let it hollow her out. She carried it with a kind of grace that most adults twice her age never managed to find. She looked at the thing that made her feel most vulnerable and decided to turn it into something. She wanted to work in cosmetology. She wanted to help people feel beautiful. She wanted to use her own story, the hard parts of it, the parts that stung, as a way of connecting with other people who were carrying their own quiet wounds. That is not a teenage dream. That is wisdom. That is a kind of emotional intelligence that you cannot teach. By the spring of 2009, as Britney was 17 years old and moving forward, she had a boyfriend named John. She had a tight circle of friends. She had a mother who loved her and trusted her, genuinely trusted her. The kind of trust that is earned over years of a teenager proving herself to be exactly who she says she is. She had everything ahead of her. And then spring break arrived. Every April, something happens across North America. Schools start counting down. Group chats light up. Plans get made. And young people begin the annual ritual of chasing that specific, unrepeatable freedom that only spring break seems to offer. The sense that for 1 week, the regular rules of your life do not fully apply. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was one of the places pulling that crowd in the spring of 2009. Warm weather, beach access, an energy in the air that made it feel like the center of the world if you were 17 and your whole friend group was going. And many of Britney's closest friends were going. Her boyfriend was going. Britney wanted to go, so she walked up to her mother Dawn and she asked. Dawn said no. It was not a knee-jerk no. It was a considered and entirely reasonable no. Dawn understood exactly what these trips looked like in practice. Teenagers, limited adult supervision, the very real and predictable presence of alcohol moving through the group. She had no interest in sending her 17-year-old daughter 800 miles down the coast with that particular combination of ingredients. The answer was firm. It was not changing. Britney regrouped. She came back with a compromise that sounded much safer. What if instead of Myrtle Beach, she spent spring break at a friend's house along the beaches of Lake Ontario? Just a short drive from home, practically supervised. Low-key. Nothing to worry about, Mom. Dawn thought it over the way any mother does when she knows her daughter well enough to want to say yes, but cares too much to say yes carelessly. She had never had serious cause to worry about Britney. Her daughter had never given her a reason to distrust her. The Lake Ontario plan sounded manageable. Eventually, Dawn agreed. On April the 22nd, 2009, Britney kissed her mother goodbye, grabbed her things, and climbed into her friend's car. She was not going to Lake Ontario. As the car pulled away from the house and disappeared down the road, Dawn stood in the driveway and watched it go. And something moved through her that she could not explain or name. Mothers talk about this, that specific wordless pull in the stomach that does not connect to anything logical but will not go quiet either. It is not anxiety. It is not worry in the ordinary sense. It is something older and more instinctive than that. She felt it that morning. She could not explain why. She was right. Britney and her friend drove south for 800 miles to Myrtle Beach. For the first few days, Myrtle Beach did what Myrtle Beach does in April. Beach volleyball during the long, warm afternoons. Parties and music and loud, crowded rooms at night. New faces and the ocean air and the particular feeling you get when you're young and away from home, and everything feels like it has just barely begun. But something nagged at Britney about the group of girls she was staying with. A dynamic she could not quite place her finger on. A tension beneath the surface that made her feel like she was on the outside of something she had not been told about. Whatever it was, it made her uncomfortable enough that she started spending more of her time with a young man in the wider group named Peter Bruschitz, who was staying at a nearby hotel called the Blue Water Resort. By April the 25th, the tension in Britney's room had broken into an actual argument. The kind of petty, frictionless conflict that happens between people sharing small spaces for too many days in a row. Nothing serious, nothing dramatic. Just enough irritation that Britney decided she needed to step out and clear her head. At around 8 o'clock in the evening, she walked over to Peter's hotel. Surveillance cameras along South Ocean Road caught her as she walked. A second camera recorded her stepping into the lobby of the Blue Water Hotel minutes later. She was there. She was fine. She was with a friend. And then one of the girls from her room sent a text message. "Return my shorts." It sounds like nothing. It was nothing. A borrowed pair of shorts needing to be returned. Britney agreed, because that is the kind of person she was. She did not want the drama. She did not want the conflict to continue. She just wanted things to be fine. At 8:45 in the evening, she said goodbye to Peter and began the walk back to her own hotel along South Ocean Road. She had her phone out. She was texting John as she walked, her boyfriend back home, the person she had been messaging back and forth with all day. The conversation between them was ordinary and warm. Two young people talking the way young people in love talk, about nothing in particular and everything at once. There was nothing in those messages to indicate that anything was wrong. There was nothing in her tone, nothing in her words, to suggest that she felt unsafe or afraid. And then the messages stopped. John noticed within minutes. He knew her patterns. He knew that she always said goodbye when she was stepping away from her phone. She always let him know when she was going to be unavailable. She always ended the conversation. Never let it just trail off into silence. But this time there was no goodbye, no warning, no see you in a few minutes. Just silence, sudden and complete. He sent more messages. Nothing came back. He called her number. It rang out. He called again. Nothing. He told her in a message that if she did not respond, he was going to call her mother. He meant it as a way to get her attention. The way you do when you're worried and trying not to panic. But the panic is already starting to build. Hours passed. She did not respond. John knew. He'd not suspected, not feared, knew. In that particular way that people know things before they have language or evidence for them. He reached out to the girls Britney had been staying with. Had they seen her? Had she come back to the room? No, she had not. John picked up the phone and made the call he had been dreading every minute of that silence. He called Dawn and he told her everything. Where Britney actually was. Where she had actually been going all along. The full truth of what had been kept from her. And in that moment, with that phone call, a mother's worst fear stopped being a fear and became something much more concrete. Dawn did not have time for anger. She called 911 and reported her daughter missing. Within hours, both she and Britney's biological father had boarded flights to South Carolina. They hit the ground running, knocking on doors, showing Britney's photograph to anyone who would stop and look, covering every inch of the area they could reach on foot. A handful of witnesses came forward in those early days with claims of having seen Britney near a bus stop, outside a convenience store. Both leads were followed upon with urgency, and both of them evaporated without producing anything useful. Law enforcement expanded the search. They went through abandoned buildings. They dug through dumpsters. They combed parks and lakes and swamps with the kind of exhausting, methodical thoroughness that true searches require. The kind where you go home at the end of the day with nothing to show for it, and come back the next morning and do it all over again. Nothing. The single most concrete piece of evidence in those early days came not from the ground, but from Britney's cell phone. Her phone had pinged off a cell tower located approximately 7 miles south of Myrtle Beach, in a coastal community called Surfside Beach, shortly after she was last recorded on surveillance camera. Then, roughly 2.5 hours later, it pinged again, this time from a tower approximately 50 miles further south, near a small coastal town called Georgetown. She was moving south. Someone was moving her south. And then the phone went dark. It never came back on. As a standard precautionary measure, investigators ran checks on all registered offenders in both the Myrtle Beach and Georgetown areas. In August of 2009, police searched a hotel room in Georgetown County. They told the public only that they were examining a person of interest. They did not release a name. Then a name surfaced publicly anyway. Raymond Moody. Myrtle Beach. Police officially named Raymond Moody as a person of interest in the case. His property was searched. Investigators looked hard at his background and his whereabouts. But when the search of his property turned up no physical evidence connecting him directly to Britney's disappearance, the lead collapsed. Raymond Moody was cleared. The investigation lost its footing. Weeks became months. Months became years. And with every season that passed without an answer, the case grew quieter, and the family's pain grew louder. I want you to sit with what comes next for a moment, because what Dawn Drexel did in the years that followed her daughter's disappearance is not something you can summarize quickly without doing it a disservice. She did not step back. She did not retreat into her grief and let the world forget Britney's name. She organized awareness campaigns and kept them running. She maintained active telephone hotlines so that anyone with information had a direct, immediate way to reach someone. She offered financial rewards for credible tips. She had billboards posted along the exact roads her daughter had last traveled, so that every driver who passed through that stretch of South Carolina would see Britney's face and know her name. She traveled back to Myrtle Beach multiple times every year to hold events, to stand on the same streets where Britney had walked and hand flyers to strangers and look into their faces and silently ask whether one of them might be the person who finally gave her an answer. 6 years passed. Dawn knew, with the quiet devastation that time forces onto hope, that the likelihood of finding Britney alive had diminished to almost nothing. But she had never been searching only for Britney alive. She wanted to bring her daughter home. Whatever remained of her, she wanted to bring her home. And then, approaching the 7th year since Britney vanished, Dawn Drexel made a decision that I think about every single time I cover this case. She packed up her life in Rochester, New York, said goodbye to the city where she had raised her daughter, and relocated entirely to South Carolina. She moved herself to the state where Britney was last seen. She planted herself there, close to the investigation, close to the streets, close to the people who might one day have something to tell her. What do you call that? Grief does not cover it. Grief is something you endure. What Dawn Drexel did was something you choose. Over and over, every single day, she chose to stay in the fight. But that is devotion, and it deserves to be named as such. In June of 2016, 7 full years after Britney walked down South Ocean Road for the last time, the investigation received its first significant new development. It came from inside a prison. A man named Taquan Brown, who was serving time at McCormack Correctional Institution in South Carolina on an unrelated manslaughter charge, came forward with a story. He told investigators that a fellow inmate named Timothy Deshaun Taylor, currently serving time for robbery, had been involved in the death of Britney Drexel. He claimed approximately 10 other men had also played a role. Taquan's account was specific. He said that before his incarceration, he had traveled to a property in a rural area outside a town called Megget, a location that sat not far from where Britney's cell phone had last pinged, to deliver money to Timothy's father. While at the property, he said he witnessed Britney being assaulted inside. He said she fought back. He said she burst through the front door in a desperate attempt to escape. Timothy, according to Taquan, caught her and dragged her back inside. Taquan then claimed he heard 2 gunshots. It was a dramatic account. It was highly specific in certain details, and it immediately raised a question that no version of his story was ever able to satisfactorily answer. Why wait 7 years if you witnessed what Taquan Brown claimed to have witnessed? If you were present at the location where a 17-year-old girl was killed? What possible reason would you have for sitting on that information for 7 years before sharing it with anyone? 7 years during which her mother was posting billboards and running hotlines and relocating her entire life just to stay close to the investigation. What explanation existed for that silence? None that held together, and his story only deteriorated further under examination. 3 years after first coming forward, Taquan changed his account in a fundamental way. He now claimed he had actually seen Britney alive, not once, but on 2 separate occasions, after the very day He had originally said she was killed. The timeline of his story had shifted enough to invalidate itself. No physical evidence supported any part of his account in any version. No witnesses corroborated a single detail. Timothy Taylor denied the accusations in their entirety. He denied having ever met Taquan. He denied any knowledge of or involvement in Britney's disappearance. His friends and family provided consistent, matching alibis for the night in question. The lead collapsed. A red herring. A costly and exhausting distraction that pulled investigative resources and family attention away from the real answer for years. By 2019, the case had gone cold again. 10 years. It's 10 years since Britney Drexel walked down South Ocean Road and simply ceased to exist in any way her family could reach. 10 years of sleepless nights and early morning phone calls that turned out to be nothing. 10 years of a mother checking her messages before she got out of bed every morning in case something had finally come through. 10 years of unanswered questions sitting like a weight in the chest of everyone who loved that girl. 10 years of nothing. 2022. 13 years had now passed since April the 25th, 2009. Most of Britney's family had reached a place, a painful, reluctant, exhausting place, where they had accepted in their hearts that she was gone. What they did not have, what they had never had, was the truth. They did not know what happened to her. They did not know where she was. They had been carrying the weight of not knowing for 13 years. In the spring of 2022, investigators undertook a renewed and systematic review of every registered offender who had ever been connected to the original case. A name came back up: Raymond Moody, with new scrutiny applied to inconsistencies in his previous statements. Investigators detained Raymond Moody and charged him with obstruction of justice. He was brought in for questioning. And something happened inside that interrogation room that investigators would later describe as difficult to fully explain. Raymond Moody seemed to sense that it was over. Not cornered in the way that frightened people get cornered. Not defensive. Something quieter than that. He seemed to arrive at a kind of internal reckoning, an understanding that whatever he had buried out there in the woods near Georgetown, law enforcement was going to find it eventually. That the distance of 13 years had not protected him the way he might have once believed it would. And so after 13 years of silence, Raymond Moody confessed. He told investigators what happened on the night of April the 25th, 2009. While Britney Drexel was walking south along South Ocean Road to return those borrowed shorts, Raymond Moody was there. He grabbed her, forcibly, against her will. With no witnesses present and no surveillance camera positioned at that particular stretch of road to record what was happening. No one saw it happen. No one was going to stop it. He drove her to a location he did not identify publicly. He assaulted her. And then he took her life. The following day, he drove to the woodland area near his property in Georgetown County, and he buried her, 4 feet underground, in the dark, among the trees, where nobody would think to look, and nobody would find her. That last cell phone ping, the one from the tower, approximately 50 miles south of Myrtle Beach, the one closest to Georgetown, the one investigators had been looking at for 13 years, It had been pointing directly at Raymond Moody's property the entire time. Following his confession, investigators drove with Raymond to the exact location he described. They brought equipment. They began to dig, 4 feet underground. They found what remained of Britney Drexel. Skeletal remains, the physical remnants of a 17-year-old girl who had wanted nothing more out of that week than a few days at the beach with her friends, who had been texting her boyfriend about something light and ordinary. Minutes before, a stranger grabbed her and ended her life. Forensic investigators compared the recovered skull to Britney's dental records. It was a confirmed match. After 13 years, Britney Drexel was finally coming home. When Raymond Moody's name and photograph became public in connection with Britney's case, old wounds tore open across South Carolina.
For 13 years, I have searched for
Because
Britney
Raymond
and
Moody
suffered the loss
was
of a
not a
child.
man the justice
For
system
13
had
years,
overlooked.
others were blamed
He was
for
a
your
man the
action,
justice
and
system
for that,
had
I
caught,
am so sorry for
sentenced,
all they endured.
and then released halfway through his
Brittany was
sentence.
a beautiful 17-year-old.
And the consequences
with her full
of
life
that
ahead of her.
decision had now been sitting in a grave in Georgetown County for 13 years. Raymond grew up in a home that gave him very little in the way of stability or safety. His mother struggled with alcohol. His father was violent.
I am
The
so
kind of
glad
childhood
my
that does
daughter
not
was
build a
feisty.
person
She
up
fought
so
back.
much
She
as it
fought for her
systematically
life.
takes things
We
away
know
from
now
them.
that she's scratched
Confidence,
the hell out of
security,
your head, face, and neck.
the sense that the
You will
world is a place
forever
that operates
carry
on
the
fairness
scars
or
of what
care.
my daughter did to you.
As a young man, Raymond left for California. He joined the military. He eventually married and had 3 children of his own. On paper, it looked like a life that had found its footing. But Raymond Moody carried something inside him that no surface structure could contain. In 1983, Raymond Moody was convicted of serious crimes against 3 young victims, all of them under the age of 14. The court sentenced him to 42 years in state prison. It was a sentence that reflected the severity of what he had done and the danger he represented. He served 21 years, half. He served half. In 2004, Raymond Moody walked out of prison on parole. Within 4 years, he had already been arrested again, this time for indecent exposure. He was released. In 2009, he failed to fulfill his legal obligation to register as a sex offender, a non-negotiable requirement for individuals with his history. He was convicted for that failure in 2010. In and out of custody, picked up, processed, released, Chiton, a system, cycling him back onto the streets over and over again while he demonstrated at every turn that he had not changed and was not going to change. And in the spring of 2009, Raymond Moody was a free man living near Georgetown, South Carolina. His home had been searched during the initial investigation. No physical evidence had been found connecting him directly to Britney's disappearance. So, the investigators cleared him, and Britney spent 13 more years in the ground. When Raymond Moody's connection to Britney's death became public, a woman came forward. Her name was Carrie Harding. Carrie was 8 years old the day Raymond Moody abducted her from a playground. 8 years old, small enough to be carried, young enough to not fully understand the danger she was in, and old enough to feel every part of it anyway. She did not know if she was going to see her family again. She did not know if she was going to survive. But Carrie Harding, even at 8 years old, was paying attention. At some point during her captivity, Raymond allowed her to go around the back of his vehicle. And in that small window of time, standing behind the car, Carrie noticed something. A green bumper sticker on the back of his car. She ran. Raymond came after her immediately. He was closing the gap fast. And then Carrie saw something in the distance that changed everything. Two people. Hikers moving through the area, far off but visible. She screamed. She ran toward them as fast as her legs would carry her, and she threw herself into their arms, and she did not let go. Raymond Moody retreated to his vehicle and drove away. That green bumper sticker, the one a terrified 8-year-old girl noticed while running for her life and held in her memory with startling, as precise clarity, was later identified as a sticker issued for access to a nearby naval base. It was enough. That detail was enough to identify Raymond Moody, connect him to the abduction, and ultimately convict him. Following that conviction and 2 additional charges, Raymond Moody was sentenced to 42 years in prison. He served 21. And because of that, on a warm April night in 2009 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Britney Drexel paid for that decision with her life. While Carrie Harding had survived Raymond Moody by running toward strangers in a field, Britney Drexel encountered him on a dark stretch of road with no one around to run to. That distinction, survivor and victim, is not a difference in strength or intelligence or worthiness. It is a difference in circumstance. And no survivor should ever be asked to carry the weight of that. While Raymond Moody was incarcerated for his crimes in 1983, he apparently formed a close friendship with a fellow inmate named Ernie Merchant. At some point, Ernie asked him a direct question. Why? Why did you do these things? And Raymond answered him, I don't know why. I had the impulses and thoughts for a long time before I acted on them. I felt it building up in me until I couldn't control it anymore. And after this one, it got easier. I became someone else, someone that didn't care. It got easier. 3 words, and they tell you everything you need to know about the catastrophic failure at the center of this case. If Raymond Moody had been required to serve the full 42-year sentence that was handed down to him in 1983, the sentence that was specifically calibrated to reflect the danger he posed to the public, he would not have been walking freely through the streets of Myrtle Beach in the spring of 2009. He would have still been in prison. He would have been 68 years old before he saw the outside world again. Britney Drexel would almost certainly still be alive. She would be in her early 30s today. She might be working in cosmetology, helping people feel beautiful the way she always dreamed of. She might be modeling, building a platform out of her own story, showing people who have felt different or diminished that beauty and strength come in every form. She might be in a relationship, building a life, becoming in full the person she was already clearly beginning to be at 17. Instead, she spent 13 years in the ground in Georgetown County while her mother drove back and forth across state lines with a stack of flyers and a telephone hotline and a grief that never once loosened its grip. Rehabilitation is real. People genuinely do change. I believe that. But the standard by which we decide who is ready to re-enter society must be proportionate to the risk involved. It must be honest about what the evidence says. In Raymond Moody's case, the evidence said he was not ready. The evidence said it loudly. The 2008 arrest, the failure to register, the unbroken pattern of a man who had not changed and was not changing. And yet the streets took him back anyway. An innocent young woman is gone because of that. Britney Drexel deserved better from this world. She deserved the chance to grow up, to build the life she had already started imagining, to love and be loved, to stand in front of people and say, I have been through hard things, and I am still here, and I want to help you feel that way too. She was 17 years old. She had a whole life ahead of her. Raymond Moody decided she did not get to have it. For Carrie Harding, who ran for her life as a child, whose presence of mind under terror helped put this man away the first time. Learning that he was responsible for Britney's death must carry a weight that is almost impossible to describe. She survived him. Britney did not. And the only difference between those two outcomes was circumstance and a system that should have kept him locked away. Britney Drexel's family now has what they spent 13 years searching for. They have the truth. They know what happened. They have her remains. They have a confession on record. They have a legal process moving toward its conclusion. They have, for the first time in over a decade, something that functions imperfectly, incompletely, but genuinely, as closure. It is not enough. It will never fully be enough. There is no sentence that balances the weight of a life taken. There is no verdict that brings Britney back. But her family knows, and after 13 years, knowing is not nothing. Raymond Moody will, in all likelihood, never walk free again. And for that, at minimum for that, justice will have the final word. If this story stayed with you, if you believe that Britney's name deserves to be remembered and that cases like this one deserve to stay in the public conversation, please take 5 seconds right now. Like this video so the algorithm keeps carrying this story forward. Comment the name of the next case you want covered. I read every single one. Subscribe and hit the bell. New cases drop regularly on Motives and Methods. Justice for Britney and for every family still waiting for answers.